January 15th, 1942. Malmö, Sweden. The silence is overwhelming. The world is at war. The roar of air raids echoes across Europe. Yet here in a quiet workshop, the clinking of metal is the loudest sound. The world does not hear this sound, nor does it care to. Outside, snowflakes fall in heavy sheets, obscuring the view of the world beyond. The streets are nearly deserted, with the occasional shadow of a passing soldier or civilian, hurried and grim. Inside the workshop, there is no hurry, no panic, only quiet determination. Lars Eriksson, a middle-aged engineer, wipes his brow with the back of his hand, his fingers stained with grease. His once pristine white shirt is now soaked with sweat, and his face is lined with both exhaustion and quiet defiance. For weeks, he has been working here in the shadows, in a space that has no name, tucked away in the corner of Malmö, where the war hasn't yet reached. The air smells faintly of machine oil and the faintest hint of something burning. There is no fanfare, no lofty ideals guiding him, only the hum of his thoughts and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Lars has always been the kind of man who believes in the power of machines, the quiet elegance of engineering, and the potential for small ideas to change the world. He has always preferred working with his hands over grand speeches or strategies. But today, in this moment, he is building not just any machine, but one that could change the course of history. His work, though seemingly simple, parts and tools strewn across the table, holds the promise of an incredible impact. The weapon he is crafting is not sophisticated. It is crude, even by wartime standards. It is made of spare parts, discarded metal, and outdated technology. The military would never consider a solution. But Lars knows something they don't. Sometimes, simplicity can be a weapon more powerful than any cutting-edge invention. With each bolt he tightens and every wire he connects, he feels a rush of pride, of knowing that in this small corner of the world, he is making something that could help stop the tide of destruction engulfing Europe. But there is no recognition, no validation for his work. No one outside of this room believes in the power of what he is doing. His hand pauses on the lever of a makeshift mechanism, his thoughts drifting for a moment. He can hear the distant rumble of artillery in the far-off horizon, the sound of destruction tearing through cities that are no longer recognizable. And yet, here he is, constructing a weapon that could disrupt that very destruction. It's almost absurd. One man, building from discarded scraps, in the middle of a world that seems determined to burn itself down. A chuckle escapes his lips, though it is a hollow one. What does one man matter? What does one machine matter in the grand scheme of things? He's no soldier. He's no tactician. He's just a man who believes that sometimes the most unlikely solutions come from the most unexpected places. The military has long since turned its attention to new technologies, bombers, tanks, rockets. But here in this quiet workshop, Lars Eriksson is working with nothing more than a vision, a few tools, and the belief that what he's doing could make a difference. The paradox is not lost on him. The world is full of grand armies, advanced technology, and strategies devised by generals and politicians. But it is in this small, dimly lit workshop that the potential for real change begins. It is a humble, almost absurd thought. How could such a simple invention, built from nothing more than spare parts, become the turning point of a war? How could an idea so small, so ordinary, stand against the tide of destruction? But as he continues his work, Lars pushes these doubts aside. There is no time for hesitation, no room for second thoughts. In this moment, he is not a man out of his depth, but a man who knows exactly what he is doing. Every piece that comes together is another step toward the impossible becoming real. The world may not see it now, but there are pieces to this puzzle that can shift the course of history. His hands are steady as he picks up a rusted piece of machinery, one that would be discarded by most, but to Lars, it is a treasure. He runs his fingers over the worn edges, his mind already working, already seeing the machine in his head. The military would laugh at the idea, an engineer, not a soldier, creating something to fight the enemy. But Lars doesn't need the approval of generals or politicians. He needs only his vision and the tools before him. For a brief moment, he imagines what the reaction will be when his invention is put to the test. The military, dismissing it as an amateur attempt. The generals, too entrenched in their own strategies to recognize the brilliance in front of them. But the thought doesn't stay with him long. He knows the truth. The world is full of men who never get the credit they deserve, full of ideas that go unnoticed until it is far too late. But for now, he doesn't care about recognition. He cares about the creation. There is a small crack in the silence, and Lars looks up, startled. The sound of footsteps outside, faint but steady. His heart skips a beat. Have they found him? The military? The Gestapo? Someone from the local resistance? But no. The footsteps pass by the door without a glance. He exhales slowly, shaking his head at the paranoia that has settled into his bones. He knows that the more he continues his work, the more risk he invites. But there's no turning back now. Not after everything he's already sacrificed to make this happen. Lars Eriksson is a man alone in his beliefs, a man with a vision that the world will not see for a long time. He knows the risk. He knows the danger. But as he tightens the final bolt on his creation, he doesn't feel fear. He feels something else entirely. He feels the undeniable certainty that this will matter, even if no one understands why. In a world at war, perhaps it's the quietest voices that are the most powerful, the smallest acts of defiance that have the greatest impact. As the sun sets over Malmö, casting long shadows across the room, Lars takes a step back from his work. The machine stands there, crude and imperfect but ready. He doesn't know if it will work, if it will succeed, but he knows one thing for sure. He has done something the world will soon recognize, whether it knows it or not. Cut to black. The world is still unaware of what is happening in this small workshop, but soon it will not be. The questions will rise. How did it happen? Who made it possible? And why was it so simple, so unassuming? The answers are yet to come. March 2nd, 1942. Berlin, Germany. The enemy is unaware of the storm brewing to the north. The city hums with the tension of a war that has already consumed much of Europe. In the air, there's a pervasive sense of dread. Air raids have become as common as the flickering lights of street lamps. For the people of Berlin, the war is not something distant or abstract. It is an ever-present reality. Yet in the midst of this, there's something else, a quiet undercurrent of resistance, a spark of innovation that no one expected. In a small, inconspicuous workshop nestled in the outskirts of the city, Lars Eriksson's creation is coming to life. The man once dismissed as an outsider by both the military and the general public is now the unlikely architect of something that might change the course of the war. What had begun as a simple, almost naive idea, constructed from spare parts, broken machines, and cast-off materials, is slowly becoming a reality. His work is unorthodox, crude by the standards of the great military minds of Europe, but in the midst of the chaos, his invention is nothing less than revolutionary. Lars is not alone. Around him, a small group of engineers, mechanics, and thinkers, all with their own sense of urgency, are working under his command. They are no soldiers, but rather misfits. Individuals with no place in the grand strategy of the war, yet each possessing a unique set of skills that make them invaluable. The team works in silence, their movements synchronized in a way that speaks to their shared belief. What they're building could be the key to halting the enemy's advance. Their mission is clear, though few of them fully grasp the enormity of it. The military continues to view them as amateurs, their efforts relegated to a footnote in the larger narrative of war. But Lars, with his singular focus, knows the truth. They're standing at the edge of something monumental, something the generals have failed to see. There is no grand strategy behind their actions, no lofty ideals of heroism or glory. Instead, it is the quiet determination of a small group of outsiders working together to create something that, if successful, could tilt the balance of power. Outside, the war rages on. The German High Command is focused on its strategies for conquest, obsessed with tanks, aircraft, and the overwhelming force of numbers. Yet in this small, inconspicuous workshop, a simple machine is taking shape. The technology Lars and his team are working on isn't sophisticated. It isn't anything that would impress a general or a strategist. But it is something new. It is something that can take the enemy by surprise, something that, though crude in appearance, could have an impact greater than any of the sleek, polished weaponry being paraded across the front lines. The invention they are building is an unconventional device, an oddity in a world of scientific precision and military expertise. It does not rely on the latest research, nor does it come with a long history of military doctrine. Instead, it is a solution born from necessity, from the desperation of knowing that the war cannot be fought with the same old tactics and strategies. It is a machine that operates on principles most would dismiss: cheap materials, rudimentary engineering, and a vision too small to be recognized by those who hold power. But Lars doesn't need the approval of generals, and neither does his team. They have already been dismissed. They have already been ignored. All they need now is the belief that what they're doing matters. They have a deadline, a moment when the machine will be put to the test. In a few days, the enemy will launch an invasion in a part of Europe where resistance is weak, where the front lines are thin, and where the stakes could not be higher. It is here, in the midst of this impending attack, that Lars and his team plan to strike. They will deploy the device they have been working on, hoping that against all odds, it will be enough to halt the enemy's advance. The stakes are high, but for Lars, there is no alternative. This is their only chance. The team works in a fevered silence. No one speaks of failure. No one speaks of doubt. There is no time for such thoughts. They know what is at stake, not just the outcome of this battle, but the future of the war itself. If they fail, it will be a failure unnoticed, a single drop lost in the vast ocean of history. But if they succeed, if this odd, unpolished machine proves itself capable of stopping the enemy, it will change everything. It will be the kind of victory no one will expect, no one will understand until it is far too late. As the days pass, the machine is pieced together, its components fitting together in ways that feel almost accidental. It is not a thing of beauty, nor is it the work of highly trained military engineers. But it works. Slowly, carefully, it takes shape, its purpose clear to those who are building it. Lars can feel the weight of history pressing down on him with each passing hour. His mind races as he considers the implications of their work. He knows the risks. If this does not work, there will be no glory, no recognition. They will fade into the background, just another forgotten attempt at resistance. But Lars is not concerned with glory. He is concerned with the now. The war is not waiting for him, and neither can he afford to wait for the approval of those who have already dismissed him. The final test is set to take place in a remote area, far from the prying eyes of the military establishment. Lars and his team are ready. The machine is loaded, prepared for deployment. The moment of truth is at hand, and as Lars stands at the edge of this moment, he feels a curious calm settle over him. In this moment, there is no fear, only a sense of purpose, a quiet understanding that what they're doing could change the course of the war. They are not soldiers, nor are they generals, but they are something else. They're the unsung architects of a new kind of warfare. The machine hums to life. Its crude, imperfect form is now something more, something capable of doing the impossible. Lars steps back, watching the device in action. It works. It works against all odds, against every expectation. The enemy is stunned. The invasion falters. For a brief, fleeting moment, the tide of war turns. But Lars and his team know the truth. The war is far from over, and the victory they have achieved will be recognized by few. In the days to come, their names will not be shouted from the rooftops. Their work will be dismissed, overlooked by those who believe in the power of advanced technology and polished strategies. But Lars does not care about recognition. He cares only about the work, about the moment when the impossible became possible, when a group of misfits, armed with nothing more than belief, took on the forces of history and won. April 18th, 1942. The Baltic Sea. The sky is overcast, heavy with expectation. The war had already taken so much from the world, and the small group of misfits who had created a weapon from nothing stood at the precipice of their moment. They had done the impossible. Lars Eriksson's crude invention had stalled the enemy's invasion, buying the resistance and their allies the precious time they needed to regroup. For one fleeting moment, it seemed as though the tides of history might turn, as if the ingenuity of a few could reshape the brutal course of the war. But now, the victory they had achieved seemed almost irrelevant in the face of a much larger, more intractable truth. The machine, the oddity made from discarded scraps, had worked. It had functioned better than anyone, certainly better than Lars, had ever dared imagine. But the moment had passed. The dust was settling, and no one was there to claim credit. The world, preoccupied with its grand strategies and overwhelming forces, was already moving on to the next battle, the next front. Lars and his team, still digesting the magnitude of what they had accomplished, were left in the shadows, forgotten once again. Lars stood by the window, looking out at the churning, gray waters. The Baltic was restless today, the waves crashing relentlessly against the shores. Much like the war, the sea had no mercy. There was no heroism in its waves, no recognition. Yet, Lars had always found something strangely comforting in the sea's indifference. The vastness, the certainty of its nature. It was a reminder that history, like the ocean, could be a force that moved with or without you. But today, it was not comfort he sought in the waves. The reality of what had happened settled in, cold and unsparing. His team had stopped the invasion, delayed the enemy's march, but no one would know their names. No one would write their story. The victory they had secured had slipped through the cracks of history, unnoticed and uncelebrated. The generals, the military, the press, they would all focus on the larger battles, the grand strategies that had played out elsewhere. What had Lars and his small team done? They had simply interrupted the inevitable, an unsung effort that would soon be forgotten. Lars felt the weight of it, the quiet, crushing disappointment of being unnoticed when one has done something extraordinary. How could they all be so blind? How could they continue to ignore the impact of such an unconventional solution? His machine had altered the course of this battle. He knew it, his team knew it, but no one else did. No one would care. The victory, in the end, was as much a defeat for recognition as it was a triumph of ingenuity. The world had no place for men like Lars. Men who had no rank, no reputation, no place in the history books. They were not soldiers or generals, not leaders or strategists. They were just a handful of engineers who had built something from nothing, something the world would never fully understand. And yet, in this small, obscure corner of the war, they had done something important. They had stopped the invasion. They had defied all expectations and shown that, sometimes, the most unlikely solutions came from the most unexpected places. But it was all too easy for the powers that be to overlook the quiet victories of those who had no voice. Lars turned away from the window, the cold wind from the sea biting at his skin. He looked at the workbench, the remnants of their invention scattered across it. Tools, half-finished parts, blueprints. It was all so temporary. It all seemed so insignificant now. How quickly the world moved on. How easily history erased the small, the insignificant, the unnoticed. The machine they had built would likely be forgotten, its legacy lost in the tides of time. But Lars knew the truth. He knew what they had done. The problem was that no one else did. He walked over to the table and picked up a wrench, turning it over in his hands. The weight of it, the simplicity, was oddly comforting. This was the tool of his trade, the tool of their rebellion. Yet no one would know the true significance of this tool, of what it had been a part of. In the end, it would be just another scrap of metal, just another forgotten part of a forgotten war. He wondered if that was the fate of all things, whether it was people, inventions, or ideas. Everything that mattered eventually disappeared into obscurity, only to be remembered by a select few who would, in time, also be forgotten.